This may be hard to imagine or to remember, but it was in about the year 2000 that a new kind of television programming became part of our culture. Rather than some scripted, fictionalized story told to the screen, this programming was intended to present reality television. It's hard to believe that it was only about 18 years ago that this form of television was radical and new. Now it permeates everything. It's amazing. You turn any channel and one will find a reality television show. But what happened in 2000 was there was the granddaddy of them all, kind of iconic image for reality TV was Survivor. Y'all may remember that television show, and I remember I watched it because I was particularly interested in what it was going to be about, and so I kind of tracked it that first season. And who remembers seeing that first season of Survivor? At least we'll admit to it right now. And it was fascinating. It was really interesting, in part because the reality they constructed was that they divided, I think it was a group of about 16 people, into two tribes who had then to compete until at the end there's one survivor who will win all the money. And so they had these two tribes that were formed, and they had certain physical and mental puzzles that you tried to win, because if you won it, you couldn't get voted off the island, right? And the whole reality of this TV show was about how we have constructed reality in such a way that in a tribal sense, where people could be voted or deported off the island, so to speak. The sense in which, and part of what was interesting about that was that the winner that first season particularly wasn't the best physically or mentally, in fact, but the one who could manipulate the others, the one who could backstab. And I remember observing that, and struck by this question: is that really what reality is? This division into tribes, manipulation and backstabbing. In the year 2000, probably just by coincidence, there was this book published by a sociologist named Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone. The subtitle was Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. And good sociologists took this large database, and his argument was that we are losing in our culture and society this sense of connection. Families, institutions. He points out the loss of more and more of these kind of small group connections, from Kiwanis Club to Lions Club to bridge playing groups to all these small communities in which people were connected to each other, and even does a great analysis of how church membership is diminished, in part because of this loss of connection that we have, and this dire consequences he warned of this disconnection that's going on in our country. He pointed out in the article, he says, more and more people now in this book, a rather thick book, interesting statistics if you're into that. He pointed out, he says, more people bowl today than ever before. Bowl today than ever before. But bowling leagues are dying. And that's the title. We're all just bowling alone. And I I was struck by that reality that we seem to exist in today, the tribal nature of our culture and society, the sense in which we seem to be competing against each other in profound ways. And it's a zero-sum game, much like it was in Survivor. There could only be one winner. In our world, there can only be one winner. Part of me is always puzzled. Was Survivor a reflection already of our society, or of the reality we experience, or is it proscribing it in some way? Did we take that and assume that was our reality? The sense that we're so disconnected, so working against each other, so tribal. I don't know about you. Sometimes I think, I want to be voted off this island, you know? The story of the temptations of Jesus, these temptations can be very confusing, but very much open to interpretation. But really, all three temptations are about power. Him taking some form of power. In the first, hungry, having fasted, he's invited, or he's tempted to turn the stones into bread. Now, that sounds like a silly thing, but Henry Nouwen points out that really that's a temptation to use power to fix it. That's an odd way to think about it. But Nouwen points out Jesus had to have looked around him and seen all the people that were hungry, all those who were in need, and all he had to do was do some magic, turn some stone into bread, and he'd solve it all. Sounds good to me. The second temptation is obvious. He says, hey, you'll get all the glory, all the authority, just take power. Govern everybody, and it'll all be fixed. Just do it this way. Take the power. And the third, in an odd way, it's a way of simply affirming and asserting his immortality. You jump from this pinnacle, you won't die. You're the Son of God. You don't have to go die. That's powerlessness. Take your power. And in each case, what Jesus essentially says, you know what? It's not about me. Invited to turn the stones to bread, he says, hey, this isn't about me. Invited to take authority in the world, no. Jesus says, this isn't about me. Invited to prove his immortality, that he doesn't have to be touched by mortality, he says, hey, this isn't about me. One of the conditions that I think, there's this deep disease in our society and culture today. Disease of narcissism. The sense in which we often frame the world around the assertion, it's all about me, right? As if society was a reflection, a mirror of our own selves. And we see such narcissism in so many different ways. What does the tax cut do about me? Because, hey, it's all about me. The men who abused and disabused the women, the Me Too movement. It's about them, their desires, their needs. That the disease that's part of our society and culture, the disease at the heart of our survivor reality is the assertion, it's all about me, right? And it's interesting, if you think about it, we in the church can in some ways turn faith in the same way as being all about me. Certain strands of theology which says, well, I'm concerned about my soul and whether it's getting to heaven or not. It's all about my soul. We can even use meditation and yoga and those kinds of things as simply being about, and it's not a bad thing, about being calmer and engaging life in a more meaningful way, meditation. Those are good things. But really, ultimately, in our tradition, in the tradition of Jesus who says it's not about me, those practices are always geared to not being about ourselves. There's positives, health, mental energy, but really it's about something else. Thomas Merton, a famous Benedictine monk, when asked when he would go off and do his retreats, hours and days and weeks of meditation and prayer, when asked about what benefit he got from that, he said, you know what, if one is silent enough, if one goes off and is sitting in the silence and paying attention to the soul, he says, if you look deeply enough within yourself, you will see Auschwitz and Watts, Ferguson, Missouri. It's not about comfort. It's about transformation. Because Jesus said, it's not about me, it's about the other. It's not about my power, it's about my serving the other. And in the coming weeks, we'll see story after story of Jesus reaching out and connecting to the other. Samaritan woman, a Syrophoenician woman, Nicodemus. That Jesus' assertion about our life together is it's not about us. It's about God, our neighbor, and the other. So like many of you this past week, my grief, sadness, shock over the killing of 17 high school students. The grief that evinces for everyone, the shock of it, the sadness of it. And if there are signs of hope in the midst of that, as we feel so stuck and uncertain, so divided into our tribes, where there is a zero-sum game, where someone wins and someone loses, where we are so disconnected we can't even really talk to each other, if ever there was a symbol for me, it was that those young people have said no more. They have said no more. And they have said it's not about us. It's about everyone who could be a victim. So, brothers and sisters, I invite you this season of Lent to explore your spirit, your soul, your community. As you look within your own heart, remember, it's not about us. To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.